Today, what we want to discuss is endoprosthetic reconstruction and rehabilitation in limb salvage surgery. So, basically, it's a very broad topic, and the reconstruction and the rehabilitation varies significantly in different cases. Just a minute, sorry, there is some issue. Like, let me minimize this first. Yeah. So varies with the different cases, and then the rehab is according to the type of reconstruction. So it is little confusing for a non-surgical resident to understand, or even if a surgical oncology resident to understand what exactly the rehabilitation will be. But yes, so that is why I'll be covering first about the reconstruction options, and then we'll be discussing the rehabilitation with the reconstruction option, so that it becomes little easy to understand. And then finally we'll be discussing about the problems that we face with the rehabilitation or the reconstruction options. So this is like an overview of this presentation. First we'll be discussing the type of resections, then the reconstruction requirement, then the rehabilitation and the functional goals, and then the common problems that we face. So suppose this is a bone tumor in the lower end of a femur, as you can see on the picture on your right. So what we can do, if it's a benign tumor, we can just clean the tumor and fill it with some kind of a filling substance, which is called as a curettage. We can resect this part of a bone and reconstruct with some kind of a prosthesis or other options, which is called as an excision and reconstruction surgeries. Or we can think of and doing an amputation if the tumor is not salvageable or the limb is not salvageable. So what is curettage? Curettage exactly is like we use various kind of scoops to remove the tumor from the bone, and then we extend the cavity and we use some kind of a filling substance to fill the defect, which either can be an allograft or an autograft from the patient or a bone cement, and then we do an appropriate fixation. So, so this is the like a kind of a cavity that we are left with after a curettage, and then we use an appropriate reconstruction to fill the defect. Like we can use a bone cement, as you can see in this case, we have used a bone cement and a small screw. We can use a bone cement with a plate. And this is a similar situation in the proximal tibia using a bone cement and a plate. And the advantage of these using a cement and a fixation is we can start the immediate mobilization of the patient, like patient starts full bed bearing walking and the knee range of movement from day one. That is the advantage of using a bone cement and fixing. Or we can use, if we have a good tissue bank, we can use bone grafts. As you can see in this proximal tibia, you can see a multiple struts of the bone, which is a allograft fibula, which is harvested from a different patient and used to fill the defect, and we can use put an appropriate fixation. But when we are putting an allograft, then we need to splint these patients, and these patients are at least non-weight bearing for 6 to 8 weeks, depending upon the healing. And we have to discuss with the surgical team or the operating surgeon when to commence the knee range of movement exercise, depending upon the stability of his fixation. So as far as the today's lecture goes, I think what we want to discuss more or less is the tumor excision surgeries or the limb salvage surgeries, and which is usually done for malignant bone tumors, but sometimes for aggressive benign bone tumors which cannot be curated, as I have shown earlier. So for tumor excision surgeries, we are basically doing two types of surgeries. First is an articular resection, in which we resect the tumor along through the joint, or we are doing an intercalary resection, in which the tumor is resected, sparing the joint above and the joint below because of the location of the tumor. So the reconstruction and the rehab in both the scenario is totally different. So we'll be going stepwise from upper limb to lower limb, from articular resection to intercalary resection, and then we'll be discussing the reconstruction option first and then the rehab option. So going to the upper limb articular resections, the upper limb, the most common location of the tumor that we see is in the scapula or in the proximal humerus, and sometimes rarely in the clavicle. So basically all this falls into a shoulder girdle resections. And as far as all these three bone goes, they are functionally similar in the rehabilitation or the function. Patient usually gets a good elbow and hand function, and we aim for a stable shoulder with minimum active movement in a scapular or a proximal humerus resection, while in clavicle, patient can get a good shoulder range of movements. So like this is the case of a proximal humerus osteosarcoma rehabilitated with a reconstructed with a megaprosthesis, as you can see on the picture on the right. But the problem with the proximal humerus, as I have enumerated, patient loses origin or insertion of all these muscles like deltoid, rotator cuff, insertion of pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi, teres major, long head of biceps, part of brachialis, and part of triceps. So when patient is losing all these muscles, our aim is to get a stable shoulder. And once we get a stable shoulder, patient can get a good elbow and a hand function, as you can see in these videos.
Open, close.
Yeah, so patient get a good hand function and a good elbow function. But our aim is to have a stable shoulder so that patient can move the elbow and the hand and is functionally like we get an optimal function. Another case of a proximal humerus resection. In this, it was a hereditary multiple exostosis. After proximal humerus resection, we have put a K-nail in the defect, and the K-nail is inserted into the lower end of humerus and cemented. And the proximal part of a K-nail, as you can see on the picture on your extreme right, is sutured to the remaining glenoid with a Prolene mesh and a non-absorbable Ethibond sutures. So this is after wound closure, and this is the function that we can start immediately. So our aim is to give a stability at the shoulder. We can use a Prolene mesh if required, and then patient can get a good elbow and hand functions. And another case which was reconstructed with a proximal humerus prosthesis, as you can see in the picture in the middle, this is how we suture the Prolene mesh all along the glenoid labrum. And then we insert the prosthesis in this Prolene mesh, and then the mesh is sutured to itself so that it gives a good stability once it fibrose. So for Prolene mesh to fibrose, we need to wait. And that is how the rehabilitation is decided. So the rehabilitation is keeping the patient in arm pouch sling for 6 weeks, because that is the time that you usually require for a mesh to get a fibrosis and to give a stable shoulder. We can start in bed elbow range of movements and grip strengthening immediately after surgery, but not range of movement in standing or sitting position, because that gives a strain to the our proximal reconstruction. So our aim is to get a good stability at the shoulder, and then only we can ask the patient to go out of the sling. If we are able to spare the axillary nerve, which is very rare in a malignant tumors of proximal humerus, but sometime it is possible in pure intraosseous tumor or sometime in chondrosarcoma, then we can put this kind of a prosthesis, which we call as a reverse shoulder prosthesis. In this, normally we have a socket in the glenoid and a ball in the head of humerus, but in this, the shoulder is reversed. We have a ball in the glenoid and a socket in the shoulder, because this removes the when we are losing the rotator cuff, this can replace the function of a rotator cuff by putting a reverse shoulder prosthesis. And with this, patient can get a good shoulder range of movements. But for that, we need to have a innervated deltoid, which is important. And when we put this kind of a prosthesis, because now we are not waiting for stability to happen in the shoulder, patient can start function immediately. As far as the clavicle resections are concerned, we can do either a partial or complete resection of the clavicle, and patient usually do not have an restriction of function. The video will not work here. I'll show you the video separately. Yeah. Just a second. So, are you guys seeing my screen? Can you see my screen or not?
The screen is visible, sir.
You can see the girl video or not?
The audio is playing, but not the video.
Not the video, no? Just a second. So, maybe, yeah. 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 So now maybe you can see the girl video. Can you see? No. Not?
Only audio, sir.
Okay, no worries. So forget it. So yeah. So clavicle resection, I'll not show the video. Clavicle resection, we can get a good, almost normal shoulder function. The video is not playing, doesn't matter. Because the shoulder articulation remains.
करो.
As far as the elbow resections are concerned, we can replace the distal part of a humerus with the prosthesis, and this also gives a near normal function. As you can see that the stem of a prosthesis is fixed to the proximal part of the humerus with the bone cement, and similar the stem in the ulna also is fixed with the bone cement. The patient can start the rehabilitation immediately after the surgery. We usually allow the elbow range of movement from day one in these scenarios. We can do a lower end radius resections, and usually the wrist arthrodesis is performed. So when we are doing a wrist arthrodesis, our aim is to get a good elbow, forearm and hand function, but no wrist movement. Wrist arthrodesis is usually performed by shifting the ulna to the central part after resection of the radius, because the lower end radius is the most common site of the tumor, which is the giant cell tumor. And when we shift the ulna there, this procedure is called as ulnar translocation. And we use a long plate which is fixed from the radius to the intercalary part of the ulna to the metacarpal. And you can see the clinical picture. This is how the hand looks like. It looks a little thin, but patient gets a good elbow, forearm and hand function, but no wrist movements. In this, we need to wait for certain activities for the bone to unite, which usually takes around 3 months. But yes, still the patient can start a little intermittent forearm range of movement from 6 weeks. We usually wait for 4 to 6 weeks for the bone to form a little callus. We can even do a total humerus resection and reconstruct it with a prosthesis. Functionally, it is similar to proximal humerus resection as the patient loses the shoulder movements, but patient can get a good elbow and hand function. And the same thing happens. We lose this loss of all muscles attached to humerus. So elbow is also becomes little weak because we loses the brachialis origin also. So this is how you can reconstruct with the total humerus prosthesis with the stem going into the ulna, which is the cemented stem. So patient can start in bed elbow ROM from day one as in the proximal humerus resection. But yes, he has to be in a sling for 6 weeks because we need the shoulder to get fibrous and it gives us stability at the shoulder level. As far as the intercalary resection of the humerus goes, as I have already mentioned earlier, by intercalary we means we are sparing the joint above and the joint below, and we are just resecting the diaphyseal part of the bone. In this, it was a Ewing sarcoma. We removed the diaphyseal part, and the defect was reconstructed with a free fibula, free vascularized fibula from the leg. And then the vascularized fibula is sutured by a plastic surgeon to the recipient vessels here in the arm. And then once the bone hypertrophies or when the bone starts healing, we can allow the child or allow the patient to use elbow and the hand. Till that time, the child or the patient has to be in a sling. The patient can get almost the normal function with an intercalary resection and reconstruction with a vascularized fibula, but we need to wait for the bone to heal. And I think the best guide will be by the depending upon the surgeon who knows the stability of the fixation there. If you can get a good 3 or 4 screws proximally and distally, you can start the function immediately. But with this kind of a reconstruction where you have only 1 or 2 screws proximally distally, you need to wait till the bone heals. So that is what I have written here. When we are using a vascularized fibular graft, we need to limit the active movement depending upon the stability of the fixation. If the stability is good, we can start the active movements immediately. If not, then we need to wait. As far as the lower limbs are concerned, we have a tumor location in the proximal femur, and which is usually reconstructed with a endoprosthesis. And similar to the proximal humerus resection, you can see here that the proximal humerus, the hip joint capsule is similarly reconstructed using a Prolene mesh. So we suture the Prolene mesh all around the acetabular labrum, and then with a non-absorbable suture around the implant neck or the trochanteric piece around the neck of the implant using a non-absorbable Ethibond number 5 sutures. And then the muscles are reattached, which are the abductors to the slots in the prosthesis, the trochanteric area, and the ilios was into the slots in the medial part of the prosthesis. Once we do that, this is the proximal humerus instrumentation set that is I have just kept so that you know these are the range of instrument that we have. And this is the assembly of a proximal humerus trial prosthesis so that you understand how we reconstruct. Like we have a trochanteric piece, we have a neck component, we have a ball component, we have a section piece and a stem. So once we reconstruct it with a prosthesis, like in this case, osteosarcoma of proximal femur reconstructed with a megaprosthesis, we need to keep the limb in abduction, because if we adduct too much, the hip can dislocate. As you can see in the previous slide, there's a now artificial ball with a very long prosthesis in the proximal part with the artificial ball in the acetabulum, which can dislocate. So you need to keep the limb in abduction, and you cannot allow a complete 90 or more than 90 degree sitting. So we usually tell the patient to sit up to 60 degrees. And this is also again done for 6 weeks for the proline mesh to get fibrosis, and then it gives the secondary stability. But patients are allowed to walk immediately after the surgery. So we allow the full weight bearing walking immediately, but maintain the position of hip when the patient is standing from a lying down position, with keeping a hip flexion up to 60 degrees and keeping an abduction pillow in between the legs. As far as the knee is concerned, it is the most common site of bone tumor. We all know mobile joint with an endoprosthetic reconstruction. Endoprosthetic replacement is the reconstruction of choice, and sometimes we do an arthrodesis, which is also compatible with a good function. So if we are putting a distal femur endoprosthesis, like in this case with the recurrent giant cell tumor, we can start the full weight bearing and the knee range of movement from post-operative day 1 or 2, depending upon the patient's pain. So because as you can see in the picture on the right, the stem is cemented in both the proximal and the distal part, and we are not waiting for any soft tissue healing to happen. So patient can immediately start walking, patient can immediately start knee bending. When we are doing the same thing in the proximal tibia, although we are cementing the stem, but we are reconstructing the extensor mechanism, because as all of you know that the quadriceps tendon, the patellar tendon inserts into the tibial tuberosity, and we lose our tibial tuberosity when we are doing a proximal tibial resection. So we do a gastrocnemius flap over which we suture the patellar tendon. So in this case, patients can walk full weight bearing from day 1, but the knee range of movement is started only after 6 weeks after the soft tissue healing happens, once the proximal tibial tendon gets attached to the gastrocnemius tendon and to the implant. So we need to wait for 6 weeks for the knee range of movement, but walking is started immediately, and patient stays in knee brace for 6 weeks. So this is a patient of a distal femur resection. You can see the final function. Patient gets a good knee range of movement, and you can see that the patient starts walking immediately from day 2. You can see the drain is still there, and patient puts full weight and starts walking. Initially, they use a walker, and then they can be shifted to a stick as per their comfort. When we are doing an arthrodesis of the knee, we can either use a nail cement spacer, like in this case, a distal femur osteosarcoma, we resect it and put a K-nail spacer and use small plates, and a temporary cement was put in between. The advantage of putting a nail cement spacer is it allows for immediate ambulation because it is non-biological. We are not waiting for any healing to happen, but it is disadvantages. It is temporary because our cement can break or the nail can break. Or we can do a biological arthrodesis using turnoplasty, where we shift one part of a bone to the other side, or using a free fibula. The advantage of doing a biological arthrodesis is that it is permanent, but the disadvantage is patient requires splintage till the time the bone heals, which usually takes around 3 to 4 months. So this is a case of a biological arthrodesis that we did. This was an osteosarcoma with a pathological fracture which was intra-articular. So we had to do a complete extra-articular resection. You can see that the quadriceps mechanism, the patella, was resected completely with the tumor. And when the patient loses a complete quadriceps, you cannot reconstruct with a megaprosthesis. So we have to do a free fibular arthrodesis. We have used a long plate from the femur to tibia, as you can see in the X-ray, and we used a double barrel fibula. We harvested a long fibula, split it into two, and this was put into the defect. This was the final clinical picture, and this is the function. So patient, once the bone heals, patient can do an active SLR. They have a no neurological deficit distally. And this patient started walking after 4 to 5 months after the surgery. And now she is walking full weight bearing. And she is almost 3 years post-operative now. And she is fine. So basically, when you are doing a biological arthrodesis, you need to wait till the time the bone heals, which can be 3 to 4 months. When you are doing a nail cement arthrodesis, you can make them walk immediately after the surgery. We can even do a total femur resections, in which we replace the total femur from hip joint to the knee joint, and can use a mega prosthesis for that. Like this patient had a 50 years male, had a pathological fracture in the lower end of in the lower diaphysis of the femur. Someone thought that it is a metastasis because of the age, and then they nailed it. So when the biopsy report came, it was a high-grade leiomyosarcoma of bone. We did a PET CT, which was showing a no other lesion. So patient required a total femur excision and a replacement with an endoprosthesis. As you can see, we need to remove all the biopsy scars or all the nailing scars now because of the contamination. And then you can see the post-operative, the specimen, in which we can see a nail which is going through the medullary canal and contaminating the full medullary canal. And this was the final post-operative radiograph, a reconstruction with a total femur megaprosthesis. And this is how the patients can start walking immediately even after a total femur megaprosthesis. So the advantage of putting a megaprosthesis even in the total femur is patient starts walking immediately. As you can see in this patient, he is still walking with the drain in situ. But the rehabilitation is a mixture of both distal femur and the proximal femur. In the sense, the knee range of movement is started immediately, but the hip flexion is limited because we suture the proximal part using a Prolene mesh. So similar to a proximal femur, as you can see, there's a ball now which is in the acetabular cup and which is sutured to the acetabular labrum using a Prolene mesh and stabilized there. So patient cannot do a hip flexion more than 60 degrees. We have to keep them in an abduction pillow, but they can start walking from day 1 or day 2, depending upon their pain and the hemodynamic stability. As far as the ankle is concerned, usually the preferred treatment is not a prosthesis. It is the centralization of fibula and doing an ankle arthrodesis if we are not able to save the distal physis or distal epiphysis of the tibia. And so we do an ankle arthrodesis. And this is how we do an ankle arthrodesis. We resect the lower end tibia and the fibula is centralized and fixed. Then the plate is fixed from the talus to the proximal tibia. And as you can see that the fibula hypertrophies beautifully with time. The picture on the right, actually it is not tibia. You can see that the tibia was resected here and this thickened bone is the fibula on the picture on the right, which has now beautifully united. We had to remove the implant in this case because of the skin irritation, but you can see how beautifully fibula hypertrophies with time, but this usually takes 2 to 3 years. So these patients, when we are doing an ankle arthrodesis, requires a splintage for a very long time, usually 1 to 2 years. And then the weight bearing is started according to the healing and the strength of the bone. Usually we need to wait for at least 4 to 6 months for a complete weight bearing. So we start partial weight bearing at 2 to 3 months and then full weight bearing around 6 to 8 months, depending upon the healing and the hypertrophy of the bone. So, but once the fibula hypertrophies, then the patient can walk almost normally. As far as the intercalary resection of the lower limb goes, we are saving the joint above and the joint below, and we are just removing the intercalary segment of the tumor bone. So it preserves the joint function. We can use the various reconstruction modalities, and rehabilitation is according to the type of reconstruction that we are doing. Like if we are doing a recycling of tumor bone, which can be done by an extracorporeal radiation therapy, in which we give a radiation to that segment of a bone outside the body, or we can use liquid nitrogen also for the same purpose for recycling of the tumor bone. Like in this case, a 1-year-old child, he had a tumor in the diaphysis of the femur. So there were not much reconstruction options. So we have to do an intercalary resection, and the reconstruction was done by doing an radiation therapy of the intercalary segment and fixation with 2 small plates proximally and distally. So once we do this kind of a reconstruction, we need to wait for the bone to heal proximally and distally before the child or the patient can start walking, which usually takes 6 to 8 months. And similar to that other case in which in an adult patient, a diaphysis was involved. Similarly, the ECRT was done. In this case, the nail was put in the intercalary segment and from proximal to distal. And the rehab depends upon the healing of the bone, which usually takes 4 to 6 months. The metaphyseal healing is faster than the diaphyseal healing. We can start the mobilization of adjacent joints, and we usually don't splint this patient because what we want is a stable internal fixation rather than an external splintage. So the rehab or the weight bearing starts once the bone starts healing, at least partially, which is usually 3 to 4 months. And the full weight bearing patient usually goes at around 6 to 8 months, sometimes 9 months, depending upon the diaphyseal healing. We can also put a nail cement spacer if we are not planning to recycle the tumor bone because of many reasons, usually because of a weak bone, because of a pathological fracture. So when we are putting a nail cement spacer for reconstruction, because now we are not depending upon the biological healing, we can start the full weight bearing immediately after the surgery. Or we can get a diaphyseal prosthesis also. Like this was an intercalary prosthesis for a sarcoma in the diaphysis of the femur. As you can see, there's a long flange in the metaphyseal segment distally. And proximally, there's a small stem which can go into the intramedullary segment with a side plate. And once we do put this kind of a prosthesis, as you can see, there's some white thing below, which is an hydroxyapatite coating, which helps in the bone ingrowth once we put this prosthesis. So we can allow them weight bearing immediately, but this usually requires some external splintage for support. We can also use an allograft along with the live fibula or the vascularized fibula combo in an intercalary resection. Like in this case, an allograft was harvested from the tissue bank and vascularized fibula was harvested from the patient. And we nestle the fibula in the allograft and use this kind of reconstruction in the intercalary defect and fix it with an appropriate implant. So this also requires waiting till the time the bone heals. But when we are putting a vascularized fibula in between, the healing is faster. It usually healing happens in 3 to 4 months as compared to an ECRT or a recycling of tumor bone, which take almost 6 to 8 months. So as the healing happens, we can allow them the weight bearing. For tibial intercalary resection, we have a very good bone lying side by side, which is fibula. So we are not recycling the tibial bone. We can just shift the fibula in the center, fix it with an appropriate implant, wait for the fibula to hypertrophy, and then we can allow them the weight bearing. So now coming to the major problem that we face when we are reconstructing with the mega prosthesis or the endoprosthetic reconstruction. First and the most important problem I think that we face is the life of a prosthesis. So if we are using a good quality imported mega prosthesis, then they can last for 15-20 years. But usually the Indian design starts giving trouble after 5 to 8 years. We have certain innovations that I'll be talking in next few slides, where how we can improve the life of a prosthesis. The other problem that we face is a metallosis, because sometimes these metal ions keeps releasing in the blood and in the tissues, and they cause a severe reaction. Sometimes we face infection. And the last problem that we face is the mega prosthesis is in pediatric age, where there is a significant growth which is remaining. So going to the first trouble that we face is the life of a prosthesis. So we have now better designs, which is a rotating platform. As you can see the picture on your right, the X-ray picture, where there is a small disc in between the upper and the lower part of a prosthesis, which is a rotating platform. So this functions like a normal knee joint, and the implant survival is improved. And now most of the imported mega prosthesis that we get is a rotating platform, although Indian prosthesis that we are still getting is a fixed hinge design. And we can have an hydroxyapatite or a metal collar that I'll be showing in further slides, which helps in binding of the prosthesis, a better binding of a prosthesis to the native host bone, and improves the survival, improves the implant survival. So this is sometimes we face implant breakage because of a bad design of a prosthesis, and that is how we have rectified this. Now we use a hydroxyapatite collar. Like, as if you can see this clinical photo carefully, the proximal part of a prosthesis has some white thing. That is what I have zoomed. And this white thing actually is a hydroxyapatite collar, which allows the periosteal bone ingrowth into the prosthesis. And once this periosteal bone ingrowth happens, the prosthesis gets an additional stability, which improves the life of the prosthesis. So that is what we can do to improve the life of a prosthesis. Second thing is this kind of a design, which is a rotating platform. As you can see in the zoom picture, there is a prosthesis below, then there's a polyethylene or a plastic component, then there's a metal disc. So this disc is a rotating platform, and then there's a proximal part of the prosthesis, the upper part of the metallic, which is in the femur. So when we have a rotating platform, it now moves like a normal knee joint, and it gives a lesser strain to the metal bone interfaces of the prosthesis, and the implant survival is much better. And then we could do a good soft tissue reconstruction so as to give additional stability to the prosthesis. This is another problem that we face, which is a metallosis, which is very difficult to treat. As you can see, a severe tissue blackening now when we have to revise the prosthesis. This you can see that the plastic component is worn off in the figures below. Even the metal is bent or the eroded because of a continuous varus valgus instability and a severe metallosis. So we need to revise these prosthesis. We need to remove the metallosis, but it is very difficult to take this metallosis out because of a risk of injury to neurovascular bundle. So this is another major problem that sometimes we face in more or less in the Indian designs, not with the imported prosthesis. The other problem that we can face is an infection, but for that we need to have a very good theater environment, the laminar flow, take all the precautions, then the infection rate should be less than 1%. Going to the last and the most difficult part in choosing a mega prosthesis is in the children, because the children have a significant growth left, and we usually need something which can grow with the child, because the tumor is involving the growing end of the bone, and that is why we cannot use a conventional mega prosthesis. So suppose the picture on the right, if you see there's a yellow tumor in the lower part of the femur, and if you can see the normal bone, we have a physeal line proximal or in the distal and the proximal part of the bone. And this is where the major knee growth happens, which is almost 80% of the limb growth. So the normal limb will keep growing, but the affected limb will stop growing if we put a conventional mega prosthesis, because we are removing the proximal and the distal physis. So we need something which can grow with the child. And for that, we have this non-invasive expandable prosthesis, which have two metal tubes, which can telescope in one another, and the limb can be lengthened. Once we get a magnetic coil with these prostheses, and once we put the patient limb in this magnetic coil, it can be lengthened without a surgery. So like once we implant this prosthesis in a child, we close the wound, then this is how the limb is lengthened. The child leg is placed in a magnetic coil. We switch on the magnetic coil, and every 5 minutes or 4 minutes, the limb can be lengthened by 5 millimeters. So we usually keep lengthening the child's limb at 3 monthly follow-up by 5 millimeter till the time the growth happens or the maximum lengthening is achieved. Usually this prosthesis allows for almost 8 to 10 centimeters of a lengthening. So at every visit, the child limb is lengthened. The rehab, because now these are the fixed prostheses with cemented proximally and distally, the weight bearing is allowed immediately, and the lengthening is continued at every follow-up. So to conclude, the choice of reconstruction is decided on many factors like the age, location, the extent of the tumor, socioeconomic factors, and the expertise of the surgeon and the institution facilities which are available. The rehab is decided on the type of reconstruction, and reconstruction with endoprosthesis usually gives an immediate ambulation or function. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing my slides.
Thank you so much, sir. Uh, it was more of a surgical talk.
Yeah, it was
So
a surgical talk because you asked for a rehabilitation in limb salvage surgery. I can't help.
yes, right, sir. So though I couldn't get everything of it, but it was interesting, and some part I would like you to just
Yeah,
highlight upon. Just
yeah.
like you mentioned about the prosthesis in children. So, sir, is it like they lifelong they have to come on follow up to get it lengthened? Is it like that?
No. So see, we don't want to lengthen for lifelong. Na? We grow till skeletal maturity.
Right,
Okay.
sir. Yes.
Normal human being also grows till 16 years. Na? You don't grow lifelong. So children doesn't need to come to us lifelong for lengthening. So once, and our aim is to maintain the limb length till the child is growing. And the maximum growth that this prosthesis allows is only 8 to 10 centimeter. So once that is achieved, either you need to change the prosthesis if the remaining limb is the normal limb is still growing, or you stop lengthening if you have child has achieved the skeletal maturity.
So, like after 10 centimeter of growth,
Yeah.
like the contralateral limb is still growing.
Then
So,
you need to change the prosthesis because this prosthesis has a maximum, because when the child is small, you cannot put a very long prosthesis because the tube has to telescope from the other tube. Okay, so you cannot have a more than 8 centimeter because you need a very long prosthesis otherwise. So
so the second implant will be which we would put, will it be also expandable?
depending upon if the remaining limb is, if the suppose the child has become only 13 years and you have already exhausted your 8 centimeter, you know there's a one more growth spurt which is left. Okay, then again you need to put an expandable prosthesis.
And
If
secondly,
you have put it at 11 years and you have exhausted 8 centimeter, but you know now the child is 16 years, already achieved secondary sexual characters and skeletal maturity, then you need not change the prosthesis. So basically you need to measure the limb length at every follow-up, and you need to calculate the remaining growth left in the bone. There are growth charts which are available. We usually use a multiplier method which predicts the normal limb length. Okay, so that is how we decide upon when to change.
okay. And secondly, sir, you talked about extracorporeal radiotherapy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, like, what do we actually do? Because I have never seen it practically happening. So is it like we just take out the bone, give radiotherapy, and again implant the same bone inside the patient? Is it like that, or is
Absolutely.
it?
So so basically these are the techniques of recycling of tumor bone. Okay. When we are doing an intercalary resection, so what you can do for recycling, you can either do a extracorporeal radiation, you can use a liquid nitrogen, or sometimes you can do a pasteurization also. The best technique is liquid nitrogen because it preserves the bone architecture best. Second best is extracorporeal radiation, and the pasteurization is worse because it sometimes it causes bone disintegration. So what we are doing in extracorporeal radiation is, once we remove the bone, the wide excision of the tumor with good margins, we take this bone onto a separate trolley. Okay, we strip the soft tissues, and then we pack this bone into sterile mops and then sterile plastic, and then in a sterile box. And then this sterile box is transferred to the radiation oncology unit, where they calculate the dose, which is usually 50 gray in a single fraction. Okay, and then the bone comes back, we open the bone, and then the same bone is reimplanted. Now it functions as a contoured autograft of the patient because it matches the normal anatomy. The disadvantage is now the bone is dead, so it takes a very long time to heal, so which is usually 6 to 8 months. And sometimes we need to put cement also in the middle part of the bone to give it some strength, otherwise the bone sometimes can fracture also. So extracorporeal radiation, we do it very often. I'm surprised like why you have not seen. but this is very common kind of a reconstruction that we are doing, and we are doing extracorporeal radiation even in non-radiosensitive tumors, which is like osteosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, and Ewing's. So Ewing's, which is a radiosensitive.
Okay, so sir, like, is it the vascularity would be hampered, right? When
Yeah,
we take.
absolutely. Vascularity is hampered. So in adult patients, we sometimes add the vascularized fibula along with extracorporeal radiation.
Okay, so like you need to do another graft for that? Means I didn't get it, sir. For vascularity.
Yeah, so sometimes we do vascularized graft, putting that is called as Kapana technique, in which the extracorporeal radiation is done, okay, especially in femur, and then we put a vascularized fibula on the side of an extracorporeal radiated bone, which provides the vascularity, okay. But in small children, doing a free fibula is a very big procedure, so it is very difficult to do. That is why we are not doing in small children. Otherwise, in adults, we are doing. And vascularity is an issue, so sometimes we put an allograft at the edges, at the osteotomy sites, proximally and distally.
Okay, and so sir, are there any chances, or have you seen any case where you have seen a recurrence in a case of extracorporeal radiation? Because the tumor is also there, and we are just giving radiation or liquid nitrogen and implanting the same again inside the patient.
Yeah, so
So are
absolutely.
there chances of recurrence?
Yes, your question is correct, but the thing is, like, what the dose? I think you are a radiation oncologist. You knows me. You know much better than me. So the dose that we are giving, 50 gray single fraction, is a very high dose. Okay, it is otherwise lethal to our body. Fine. So the papers, actually, when the people have started extracorporeal radiation, they started with 250 gray of radiation. Okay. Then, but the bone was disintegrating. Then they gradually, the radiation oncologist started reducing the dose, and ultimately, finally, the dose is 50 gray single fraction, which is a very high dose which kills all viable cells. So there are reports of recurrences in surgeries which are done with ECRTs, but those recurrences are in the soft tissue cut margins and not in the bone. So per se, we usually do not get a bone recurrence in extracorporeal radiation therapy. We can get a soft tissue recurrence, but not bone recurrences.
Okay, so it is generally only for the bone tumors and not for the soft tissue.
No, if the soft tissue tumor is invading the bone, you can use an extracorporeal radiation also in the similar way. Basically, if the soft tissue can come as a wide excision without removing the bone, you don't need. But suppose the soft tissue tumor is invading the bone and your bone is otherwise having a good strength, once you resect that segment of a bone, you do an extracorporeal radiation and can put the same segment of the bone back. Because it is a very high dose of radiation, it kills all viable cells, which include tumor cells and the bone cells. So it is usually there is no reported recurrence in the extracorporeal radiation if the radiation dose was properly calculated.
And sir, what is the time in which the patient regains its functionality? Like,
So yeah, so that is what the metaphyseal healing, because the bone has two ends, the proximal and the distal end. The metaphyseal healing happens fast, which usually happens in around 3 to 4 months. Diaphyseal healing takes 6 to 8 months, and sometimes we need to graft it later. What I have seen personally is the diaphyseal healing usually starts once the patient finishes chemotherapy. Okay, so which is like almost 4 to 6 months after the surgery. If you allow me, I'll show you an extracorporeal case so that you can understand better how we do. Okay.
sure, certainly.
So yeah. So I'll share my slide again so that you understand how we are doing an extracorporeal radiation. Yeah. So can you see these slides? Okay. So
Yes, sir.
this is an Ewing sarcoma of the proximal metadiaphyseal area of the tibia. And as you can see, the proximal and the distal joints are spared, and we have calculated our resection length also. So this is our skin incision, and we can see the biopsy scar is islanded. Once this tumor bone is resected, it is stripped of the soft tissue on a separate trolley. Okay, because now we are contaminating, we are opening the tumor site, and we need to re-scrub after we do this. And this is the tumor bone after stripping of the soft tissue. This is packed in the sterile packets. And this is like in a sterile box. This was in Tata Memorial when I was carrying the bone myself. And this is how the radiation is given to the bone, which is 50 gray single fraction. Okay. Once we get this bone back, it is fixed in that same defect and fixed it with appropriate plates and the screws. And this is how the
Pura modo.
rehab starts. Patient starts
Sita.
non-weight bearing walking immediately with knee range of movements
Walking
also
mode.
immediately. And this is the function at 6 months. You can see that the patient, sorry, the videos are not working. The patient starts walking and have a good knee range of movement immediately 6 to 8 months once the bone heals. So this is how we do ECRT. But the functional results are fantastic and we usually don't get recurrences in the tumor bone.
Okay, sir. So, are there any other questions from any of the attendees?
Okay, so if no further question, I think we are right on time. We targeted 8:30, so it's 8:33.